My mother clinked her glass and said, "Some grandkids have earned their place at this table." Then she glanced at my 9-year-old and smirked. Everyone started laughing except my husband. He clinked his glass and said this. The room suddenly went pale. Christmas at my mother's house always felt more like a silent competition than a holiday. Each year, she hosted what she dramatically called the family banquet, where she made passive-aggressive remarks about who was thriving and who was coasting. This year, I had a bad feeling walking in. My husband, Evan, squeezed my hand before we stepped through the front door. Our daughter, Sophie, 9, had spent the last week rehearsing a little Christmas poem she wrote for Grandma. She was so proud of it, had even made a drawing to go with it. He wanted this to be special. I just wanted to survive the night. It didn't take long to see where the night was going. The living room already looked like a furniture showroom. White couches no one was allowed to sit on, fake candles flickering like a Hallmark ad, and a massive tree decorated in silver and gold. Sophie walked in holding her drawing wide-eyed, and my mother barely acknowledged her before rushing over to greet my sister Vanessa, who had just arrived. Music. Vanessa's sons were wearing matching blazers and brought homemade chutney jars with printed labels. My mom acted like they descended from heaven. She gushed over them, and when Sophie tried again to hand over her little gift, my mom told her to put it under the tree and save it for later. Dinner was loud. The wine was flowing, and so were the backhanded compliments. My mother started going around the table catching up on everyone's accomplishments, which always meant pointing out who had done what and who hadn't. Vanessa's kids won a robotics tournament. Her husband got a big promotion. They booked a European cruise. She talked about all of it like she was the one achieving it. Then came the toast. Everyone had just gotten their second round of wine. My mother stood up, raised her glass with a theatrical pause, and smiled. Some grandkids earned their place at this table, and she glanced directly at Sophie, then smirked. The laughter wasn't loud. It was worse than that. It was knowing. Nods, chuckles, and little side glances like they were all in on the joke. Vanessa didn't laugh, but she smiled the way she always does when she wants to pretend she didn't hear something awful. One of her sons elbowed the other, and I saw Sophie slowly look down at her plate. I couldn't move. My throat went dry. I looked at Evan. He reached for his glass and tapped it once while some adults earned their place in our lives. Silence. It was like someone flipped a switch. My aunt looked down at her lap. Vanessa stiffened. My father just blinked at his plate like he'd forgotten how to eat. Then Evan stood up. He looked at me, then at Sophie, and told us it was time to go. That's it, my mom said. You're leaving? Over that we didn't answer. I helped Sophie into her coat. Her drawing was still folded in her lap, untouched. I grabbed it and tucked it into my bag. We walked toward the door, and I heard my mom mutter something under her breath about how we were always sensitive and how maybe that's why Sophie struggled. Then came the yelling. You don't walk out on your family on Christmas. Don't be ridiculous. Evan opened the front door and let the cold air in. It was already snowing. As we walked to the car, we heard the door open again. My mother had followed us out barefoot, standing in the snow with her arms crossed. You're not going to cut us off over a harmless comment. Grow up. She looked around like someone might be watching. We didn't even turn around. Evan opened the car, got Sophie, and then came around for me. As we drove off, I looked in the side mirror. She was still standing there, arms wrapped around herself now, like she wasn't sure what had just happened. We drove home in silence. Sophie eventually fell asleep in the back seat. I took her drawing out of my bag when we got home. It was a simple Christmas tree with stick figures of her, me, and Evan, smiling. Above it, she'd written my favorite people. That was the last Christmas we spent at my mother's house. But it wasn't the end. Not even close. The silence didn't last long. We hadn't even unpacked our overnight bags when the call started. My mom, my dad, Vanessa, one after the other. First, it was voicemails laced with fake concern, hoping we got home safe, hoping Sophie was okay. Then came the guilt. Then the passive-aggressive messages. My sister finally just sent a text that said, "So, you're proud of yourselves? Hope it was worth the drama." I didn't reply to any of it. But Evan was already a few steps ahead. 2 days after Christmas, while most people were still relaxing in pajamas or returning gifts, he scheduled an emergency board meeting at the office. No warning, no agenda, just a single line. Mandatory attendance, no exceptions. My parents arrived clueless. My dad looked confused but relaxed. probably assuming it was about and fear taxes. My mom wore a blazer like she thought she'd be giving advice. Vanessa tagged along again, even though she has no stake in the business. She just likes being present for things that aren't hers. We sat in the conference room. Evan handed out documents to each of them, page after page of legal language. It was a formal buyout agreement. We were removing both of them from the company. Effective immediately, no negotiation. My dad skimmed the pages like it was a prank. My mom didn't touch hers at all, just stared across the table. Evan told them flatly. The way they treated Sophie was cruel, childish, and revealing. And if that's how they viewed their own granddaughter, as a joke, then they had no right to be part of anything we were building for her future. My father tried to stay calm and said it was a personal issue and had nothing to do with the company. Evan disagreed. He said, "The business is part of our family legacy, and people who humiliate a child in front of a room full of relatives don't get to benefit from that legacy anymore." My mom finally broke her silence and asked if this was really about one comment. She leaned into the idea that we were overreacting, that it was all a misunderstanding. Then she had the nerve to say she hadn't meant it that way. Evan didn't even look at her when he said, "You meant it exactly that way." Voices rose. My dad questioned the legality. My mom warned this could hurt our public image. Vanessa tried to interrupt, talking over everyone like she was the voice of reason. She called it a family disagreement. She said we were acting like children. Then Evan stood up. He said the paperwork had already been filed, the lawyers were informed, and their exit was happening whether they liked it or not. They could sign now and leave with dignity, music, or let the lawyers handle it the hard way. My dad stood up furious and called it betrayal. My mom refused to move. Vanessa slipped back into her usual smug tone, saying we'd lost perspective and were dragging Sophie into adult problems. That's when Evan told them if they weren't out of the building in 2 minutes, he'd have the front desk call security. No one expected that. Music. Not from Evan, and not in that cold, steady voice. But he meant it. They left. My mother slammed the door. My dad muttered that we'd need them someday. Vanessa called us delusional as she followed them out, still trying to sound superior. The silence afterward was unbelievable. We went home, and Sophie was on the floor surrounded by Legos, building a castle. She looked up and asked if we could have pancakes for dinner. Evan smiled and said, "Absolutely." Her drawing was still on the fridge, the one she'd made for my mom, who never even looked at it. I stood in the kitchen for a long time that night, just staring at it. That meeting changed everything, not just for them, but for us too. For a few weeks, we lived in a strange kind of peace. No calls, no emails, no surprise knocks at the door. It felt like they'd gone underground to regroup. At first, I wondered if maybe they were taking it seriously, maybe even reflecting. Evan didn't think so. He said it felt like a storm that had dipped below the radar, but hadn't gone away. He was right. It started subtly. A distant cousin posted family photos from a birthday party we hadn't even known about. Everyone was there, my parents, Vanessa, the cousins, their kids. Sophie wasn't invited. I recognized the tablecloth and decorations because they were exactly the same ones I'd used for Sophie's last birthday. My mom had copied everything, down to the balloon arch. The caption read, "Family means showing up." That night, Sophie asked if she'd done something wrong. I told her no, but it was hard to explain why people she'd called aunt and uncle just a month ago now acted like she didn't exist. 2 weeks later, Evan's phone buzzed during dinner. It was a message from an old business partner. "Did your father-in-law really present himself as still being on your board at the Rotary meeting?" Apparently, my dad had been hinting that he was still involved in an advisory role. Evan didn't reply, but I could see him quietly boiling as he helped Sophie with her broccoli. That was the final straw. He contacted our legal team and made it official. Any representation of involvement in our business, past or present, was now legally prohibited. We sent out the paperwork. They had 48 hours to sign or face litigation. Evan didn't want to drag it out, but he wasn't going to let them rewrite the story. Then Vanessa showed up that IT was a Saturday morning. Evan and I were folding laundry in the living room. Sophie was upstairs drawing. The doorbell rang, and when Evan opened it, Vanessa walked straight in without waiting to be invited. That used to be normal. Not anymore. She didn't say hello. She jumped right in. She said our parents were struggling, that dad was humiliated, that mom cried herself to sleep every night. She made it sound like we'd taken away their lifeline. Then she pivoted, saying we were raising Sophie in a bubble and that she needed her extended family. She used words like toxic, abandonment, emotional damage. Then she made a mistake. She turned to Evan and said, "Let's be honest. This is about your pride. You've always had a chip on your shoulder about where you came from." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Evan calmly told her this was the last time she would ever step foot in our house. He said if she showed up again, for any reason, we'd treat it as trespassing. She laughed at first, thinking he was bluffing. "You're really going to call the police on your wife's sister?" He didn't repeat himself. He just opened the front door and stood there. She left, but not quietly. Her last words before the door closed were, "This family is going to turn its back on you one by one." And she wasn't wrong. Over the next few months, the invitations stopped. Birthday parties, baby showers, holiday dinners. Our names disappeared from group chats. Sophie wasn't mentioned in posts anymore. One younger cousin unfollowed me on Instagram. Another blocked Evan. My mom started telling people we'd walked away from the family. My dad spread a version where Evan was a controlling man who had isolated me. Vanessa talked to anyone who would listen. Music, it didn't matter. We had something they never did. We were honest with each other. We didn't excuse cruelty or call it tradition. We didn't rank people or tear down a child for not being perfect. Still, it hurt, especially for Sophie. When Easter passed without even a call, Sophie asked if Grandma was mad at her. I told her the truth, that Grandma didn't know how to love people who weren't perfect in her eyes. Sophie nodded and said she didn't need that kind of love. I held her a little longer that night. By summer, my parents had adjusted. My dad found consulting work. My mom started an online store. They were fine, and once they were stable again, it became clear they didn't miss us. They wanted to win. When they couldn't pull us back, they tried erasing us instead. By fall, we were completely cut out. No invitations, no holidays, not even my mom's usual Christmas newsletter. We were ghosts. And strangely, I was okay with it. Sophie was thriving. Evan and I were strong. And for the first time in years, life felt calm. Then my brother Jake showed up. He'd always stayed out of family drama. Quiet, unnoticed, living far away. But there he was on our porch in late November, exhausted and holding a coffee, saying he needed to talk. He told us Vanessa was planning to sue, claiming emotional distress and reputational harm, and that she'd convinced our parents to support it. Evan wasn't surprised. Jake stayed the night and admitted he wanted out too. Vanessa had moved in with our parents, was draining their money, rewriting history, and worst of all, contacting our clients while pretending to represent the company. That was it. Evan called our lawyer immediately. Cease and desist letters went out. Clients were warned. Vanessa was cut off legally and publicly. That night, my mom left desperate voicemails, begging me to be reasonable, saying Vanessa didn't mean any harm. I didn't respond. Jake stayed for a few days. Before he left, he told me he finally understood, that I wasn't dramatic, just honest. Then he walked away from the family for good. By December, the silence returned. No calls, no cards. But this time it didn't feel peaceful. It felt like something was building. Vanessa had gone quiet, and we both knew that meant she wasn't done. Then the storm hit, in the form of a formal event. The storm arrived in the form of a charity gala my mother had organized every December for years. One of our biggest clients was a major sponsor, so we were invited through the company, not the family. We went to protect the relationship. Walking into the ballroom felt like returning ghosts. My mother laughed too loudly in a silver gown. My father stood stiff by the bar. Vanessa waited near the entrance in a red dress that felt more like a warning than a smile, that we kept things professional, speaking only to our client. Later, he quietly asked Evan about rumors, claims that Evan was stepping down due to health issues, that we were struggling financially. Vanessa had spread them just vaguely enough to sound believable. Evan corrected everything calmly. That was our last gala. By January, my parents sold the house where Sophie was born and moved into a smaller townhouse. The business money dried up. Vanessa's schemes collapsed. Clients reported her, the lawyer disappeared, and even her GoFundMe was taken down. She still showed up at my office one last time, accusing me of destroying the family and warning I'd regret it. Evan stepped in, pointed to the door, and told her to leave or the police would be called. She left. We never saw her again. After that, my parents erased us completely. No calls. No holidays. No acknowledgement of Sophie's achievements or our milestones. And I finally understood, it wasn't about protecting themselves. It was about punishing us for walking away first. Nearly a year passed in silence. When Sophie turned 10, they didn't call. She didn't notice. That's when I truly let go that I never got an apology. But I got peace. Our home is calm. Sophie is thriving. Evan and I are stronger. They erased us from their storied we wrote our own and built something better.